Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Kyle is engineering the broadcast. John is going to assist him. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. If you'd like to listen, the listen line is up and operational 24/7. It's working great. 605-562-6564. 605-562-6564. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
It's this morning.
Is it dark there? Yeah.
It's dark here.
Yeah. Why, Guineith, why is it dark? What's it, 2:08 a.m.?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for being with us.
Solar lights for our lighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm going to light the fire shortly during one of the ad breaks. I've only been awake for maybe about 10 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. And there we go.
So can you light a fire in 3 minutes? Because that's all you get.
I can. Yep.
Well, would you share with us? Would you share with us the method you use for starting a fire to warm your home? Okay.
We have a wood-fired stove, wood-fired cooking range, and that's the one that I'm going to be lighting. So it's got a little firebox and it's got an oven next to it. Okay. So you open the firebox door and you make a bundle with some dried small sticks of maybe 1 millimeter diameter to probably about 5 millimeters in diameter, which is a plant that lives around here called Chinaman bush. It's just all over the place here. It's a indigenous Victorian plant of semi-arid and arid areas, and it's just everywhere here. It's quite resinous, and it burns even when quite wet, and even when quite green. But we normally pick up the dry sticks of it, which are just all over the place. We normally do that, in a few minutes when probably about half an hour before it gets dark. We bring them in. They're our kindling. So we never have to chop kindling. Just go out there and get some Chinaman bush. And so I break up a bundle of Chinaman bush. I put it with some newspaper. I get a Bic lighter and I hold the Bic lighter to the newspaper, and it all flares up within seconds. And then I put some, about 1 inch round sticks, half-inch round sticks on it. And, yeah, it is quite literally burning within just a few minutes. I've got an absolutely wonderful fire going.
That's great. We use pretty much the same process, but we don't have the Chinaman bush, which is, resinous. what we do is we use little branches and pile them up, lots of air. We take some newspaper, which we don't get very much anymore. We don't subscribe to the local newspaper in the county. It only comes out once a week. It's only 8 pages, and it's it's hardly worth subscribing to. So newspapers and junk mail, that's gone by the wayside around in our neck of the woods. So sometimes we'll save some fat from cooking. Like if we cook some beef and we have some fat, we'll put that in a jar, then we'll pour that on some of the, we'll find some paper, pour the fat from the kitchen on paper. The paper is underneath some kindling, and then larger and larger sticks, and then ultimately when that gets going, we'll put some split wood on there and bigger and bigger logs, and eventually we can start putting tree stumps in there. The firebox is 4 feet
we can
by 5
put
feet.
tree stumps on this fire, but they have to be small ones.
Yeah.
Because it's about a 6-inch square firebox opening, because they, it's a range fire.
Right. It's a kitchen stove. Yeah. I have here at our house my grandmother's kitchen cook stove. It's cast iron, and it's probably similar to what you're talking about. And you can bake bread in it, and it has 4 burner tops. Where you could cook pots of stew or whatever you want to cook, and it's still here. So it's about 100 years old, and we still have it, and I kind of treasure that. So Guineith, we'd like to talk about education, right? Gosh, what a mess.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, the public training camp. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. I used to homeschool my children, and because I had a general distrust of the educational system that dated back to when I myself was in the public training camp system. And this was all the way through to college, which for me was at the University of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. For those who don't know, that's an Australian Ivy League university. They like to think that they're the Harvard of Australia, and in some areas that might be true. But I'm probably biased when I say that. But yeah, they also did teacher training at the University of Melbourne. And from time to time, I would have to go to the education library, and because I was studying environmental science and geography, and the geography part, a lot of it went into social studies, and when you get into social studies, then there tends to be an overlap with teaching. And I would see these education students, these student teachers, and I would think to myself at that time, oh my God, I'm amazed at what I'm seeing here. The phenomenon of social justice warriors is not a new one, and believe me, 20 years ago the University of Melbourne was infested with them, especially in the education, in the School of Education there, whatever they called themselves. And oh my gosh, I will never forget that they seem to, let me put it this way, they seem to have a liking for the colour purple in their hair. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Great role models.
They would have earrings out of every possible conceivable part of their body. And I would be looking at them and going, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually seeing this. And there would be rampant gender confusion. And, at that time, I thought to myself, are these people going to be responsible for the education of my children one day? And the sad answer to that was, but yeah, it's no wonder we're in trouble in our state school system. It's these people and generally they were communists as well. So if you wanted the profile of the average student teacher 20 years ago, okay, they would have radical ideas in just about every area, from their physical appearance to their politics to their gender identity. And if you didn't have such views, you didn't fit in, okay? And there were probably a few education students who were not like that. So, and I'd had bullying experiences when I was at school, when I was at high school and primary school, which had been pathetically dealt with, really. You know, I would receive things on my, I would receive comments on my report card like, Guineith does not socialise well with the other children. Yeah, maybe that's because the other children wanted to beat me up every day. Maybe that's because I didn't want to hang around them in my spare time. Mm-hmm. You know, they didn't consider that, did they?
Right.
Yeah, so when I had my own children, I said, right, I'm homeschooling them. And, you know, when you declare that, the people around you receive opposition from all of the sheeple around you. And that's just generally how it is.
Mm-hmm. That's because they don't understand it.
They don't understand.
Right. I think I mentioned this once. One of our boys was being picked on by the public training camp students. And finally, our son got annoyed with them and said, you know why you're not homeschooled? And I've said this on the air. You know why you're not homeschooled? And the boy said, why? And my son said, because your mother's not smart enough. Now we didn't teach him to say that. I mean, we didn't say, okay, son, here's what you do. When you get picked on, it just came out. And I just found out in the neighborhood here in our village, people respect our son for he's very blunt. He just says exactly what's on his mind. It just comes out and he doesn't care. Guineith Isaacs and I will be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. We're talking about homeschooling, and the story I mentioned about our son telling his friend that his mother wasn't smart enough to homeschool our son's friend. That was when he was in the equivalent of like first or second grade. So he was very, very young when he did that. And Guineith, I remember there's a church in the village, and most of the village members went to this particular church. And it was a Baptist church in Virginia. And they had a preschool, what would you call it? A preschool program there. And our son wanted to go. And we said, sure, that's fine. And so he went to preschool for like the summer. And they had a little graduation ceremony, and all the parents were there, and all the children were there, and everybody was dressed up like it was Sunday, and it was really kind of nice. And I went up to the minister after the ceremony, but while everyone was still there, I said, "Hey, I just want to say thank you so much. It was great. Our son really enjoyed it, and that completes his formal education." and we homeschooled him from that point until high school, and at which time he decided he wanted to go to the public training camp and see what school would be like, the public training camp type version of school. And he encountered those hardships that you're talking about. He was picked on, he was teased, and our other children were homeschooled too. And we were semi-ridiculed by the villagers in Virginia, and they would say things like, how would your children be social? How would they get along in society?
Oh, that's a key word.
Yes, how will they get along?
Socialization.
That's
right. You know what
that's
socialization is? Okay, take away the isation and put in an ism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, it's socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not me saying that. I think that if you read your average communist education textbook that's foisted on people at places like the University of Melbourne, they'll tell you that. And they'll be quite open about the fact that they're socialist, communist, and all the rest of it. And you know what their socialization involves? It involves teaching children to go along with the herd.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yep.
That's it in a nutshell.
Interesting that we're discussing this, because last night our son came home, and he met with the lady who owns this truck he's helping. Her brakes had failed, and he's replacing all the brake lines. And it's turned out to be a pretty significant job for the rear of the two brake lines in the rear of this Chevy truck, and they're all rusting out. It's a design flaw combined with road salt with beet juice. It's causing these brake lines to rust and fail. And so it's such a big job that you have to lift off the bed of the rear of the truck in order to, or take down the gas tank in order to get some of the lines in. And then for the front of the truck, you have to raise the cab, meaning unbolt the cab from the frame. I mean, it's whoever designed this should be drawn and quartered, really. Anyway, so our son, the woman, it turned out to be fairly expensive. The job at the dealership is $1,900 to replace the brake lines. Yeah. And the material is probably $100 worth of brake lines. The rest is labor. So our son was talking to this woman who has been here for a very long time. She's in her 80s. And she said that she had complete faith and trust in him. And he said, "Can I ask you a personal question? Why do you have faith in me? You hardly know me." And she said, well, her husband talked to our son, and my son said, "Yeah, but that was like for a total of an hour and 15 minutes, total, of all the times I've talked to him." And she said, "Yeah, but he liked you, and he's no longer alive." But she said, "Your reputation in the village, the area, is one of honesty." And he said, "Well, how would you know that?" And she said, "Well, the whole area knows your family and what you guys do, and they think you're very honest and very helpful. However, not everybody agrees with your views on the government, small government, because around here we like big government." So that's what they said. And she also said, "And because you speak your mind, you tell it like you see it, regardless of the consequences." That's what homeschooling does, class. That's what homeschooling does. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us in class. If you'd like to contact her, you can just go to usaprepares.com and click on the instructors tab, and you'll find her there, and you click her link. It'll take you right to her Facebook page. And that's probably the easiest way I can tell you to do it. So that's Guineith Isaacs on the instructors tab at usaprepares.com. Guineith, in Missouri, if the state of Missouri in the United States, if a parent decides to homeschool, that parent must provide 1,000 hours of instruction during the school year, with at least 600 hours in reading, language arts, mathematics, social studies, and science, and at least 400 of 600 hours must be taught in the home location, Missouri. Do you have regulations in Australia for those who want to homeschool their children?
Well, technically, yes. But the thing is, the whole of the government here is actually one, so-called government is actually one vast private corporation. And actually, it's the same in the United States as well. And the thing about private corporations is you don't have to consent to contract with them unless you so choose to. That's actually the truth of it. And they hate it when you point this out to them. They really, really hate it.
I pointed it out yesterday. I got a letter saying that I was delinquent in
oh, no, not another one of them. It's an extortion racket.
Well, this one was really simple. The next county over said that I have not had a business license to operate a business in their county. And so I wrote across the face of this dunning notice that I wrote official notice on it. And I wrote to the guy who sent me this letter, the tax collector, that he had made an incorrect assumption that I owed taxes. And I do not owe taxes for 2016, 2017. And I don't plan on operating a business in their jurisdiction, and I will not pay it. Yeah, and I signed it, and that's what I did. So, yeah, just because I get this corporation. Yeah. Just because Steve Pickering sends me this letter doesn't mean that, or this notice doesn't mean I'm going to pay it or agree to it. I'm not going to. And Mrs. Finelli was kind of taken aback by my bristling response to receiving this letter. She thought, maybe I should play a little bit nicer. Absolutely not. No way. No. I mean, what do you think, class, what do you think would happen if you went into a county building and said, all right, guys, you owe me $50? Do you think that they would play nice? Well, how long do you think it would take before they call the police on you? Like maybe 30 seconds, right? Yeah. So I have no intention.
I've actually sent my municipality letters saying, well, because you have vexatiously, because of your unconscionable conduct against me, I've got a damages claim against you under Australian corporate law because of your vexatious harassment against me. This is a municipality, not the school system, but the same case applies. If the school system doesn't start pulling their head in, they're going to find themselves issued with invoices too. I just put that on public record here. I've actually said the municipality and the Victoria Police both invoices which total in the 8 figures, not 7 figures, for tens of millions of dollars of damages claims.
Good for you.
Okay? And because their conduct is unconscionable in attempting to compel me to contract with them, which is a crime.
I have one small request.
Crime. Yeah.
Gwyneth, I have one small request. If you succeed in getting those damage claims, would you consider buying a farm next to us? I'd love to have you as a neighbor.
Absolutely.
Oh man. Oh boy. With our neck of the
and I think that everybody out there who has been damaged by these people because their conduct. Oh my gosh. I was just sitting and thinking about it today. These people have ruined my life. Okay? These, especially the Families Department. And believe me, in the state of Victoria, the Department of Education and the Department of Child Protection are joined at the hip. I kid you not. And I wrote in the email I sent to you earlier, and I don't know if you quite believed that at our local secondary college just down the road, okay, they have child protection workers who come and visit that school 2 and 3 times a week, and they are there to monitor the children, including and especially my children. And they have got my children, and they questioned them repeatedly without my knowledge or consent. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sending my sons, either of them, to that local secondary college because of that reason. They are a danger to my children because, you know something? I wrote to the Department of Child Protection here in Victoria, And I published the letter on my Facebook page. If anyone wants to go onto my Facebook page and read that letter, it's public, and they're quite welcome to read it. And believe me,
tell us how to get there.
They have a damages case against them. They have a massive damages claim against them, once again, in the order of tens of millions of dollars. Because when my older boy was a baby, they harassed me for the final 2 trimesters of pregnancy when I was pregnant with him, okay? Because at that time I was already a stepmother to my husband's children, and they had played hooky from school, and they had gone down to the local shopping mall, and they had shoplifted Coca-Cola and Sweeties, candy, from the local, that it's typical childhood mucking around, But those people, because of that incident, harassed me falsely. They actually perjured themselves in a court of law, the child protection workers. But thankfully, the judge had enough sense to see through them and called them to one side and alerted them to the fact that they were perjuring themselves. If they continued with the case, they would be charged with perjury, so they dropped the case at that time. I was, at that time, 36 weeks pregnant with my oldest son. He was born low birth weight because of that. He was born 4 pounds 15 ounces and just 12 inches from head to toe. And this is all a matter of it's on his Medicare record, because he spent the first 2 weeks of his life in a special care nursery. And as I've watched him grow, thankfully it did not affect his IQ. He's got an IQ of about 145. But I was doing some research, scientific research of academic papers on effects of low birth weight, effects of trauma on pregnant women in the 2nd and 3rd trimesters. Often a woman will lose her baby, that she will miscarry if she is traumatized. But what happened with me in the last month of pregnancy, the placenta began to fail. And if I had not been harassed, he would have had a birth weight of double what his actual birth weight was. So he would have been born almost 10 pounds, which is absolutely typical for the babies in our family. I was born over 9 pounds. My brother was born 10 pounds. And various other babies in the family are generally born 8, 9, 10 pounds. And we grow to be over 6 foot tall. So it is in proportion. But yeah, other symptoms have begun to manifest themselves in him, which can be directly traced back to the fact that he was born low birth weight, and that I was traumatized by the Child Protection Department in the state of Victoria during my 2nd and 3rd trimesters of pregnancy. And he is beginning to have, I'm not going to say what they are on air, but certain very serious health problems beginning to manifest themselves in him as an adolescent. And I've done and there's hundreds of scientific papers that directly tie these health conditions back to low birth weight, which is in turn caused by traumatization of the mother during the 2nd and 3rd trimesters of pregnancy. I have got solid grounds, rock solid grounds, for a massive damages case against them. I'm very fortunate that the damage against my son has not been more severe, that he's going to be okay. But he has diagnosed medical issues which directly relate back to what happened way back when. So I'm publicly putting the Child Protection Department on notice. They're going to be sued if they continue.
Good for you. Good for you. We'll be right back. Guineith, we're talking about homeschooling. And in your email to me, you mentioned building a case. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah. Okay. Now, what tends to happen, how they tend to operate, if you have children in the public training camps and somehow your child has been selected for special treatment by child protection, what they tend to do is that they will single these children out, they will pull them out of class without your knowledge or consent, this is the child protection workers, and they will question them. They will ask them leading questions without your knowledge, your consent, without any legal representation being there. And, you can use your imagination to, see what sort of leading questions these might be. But this was one of the things that we experienced when I was pregnant with my older son, was they would call aside certain of my stepchildren, and they would ask them leading questions about the behaviour of their dad, my behaviour, and so on and so forth. And what they're looking for is something that they can turn into an accusation. Okay? And it's absolutely unconscionable behaviour. And there is no way that that such a tactic would ever be considered to be something that was moral and ethical by any sort of law enforcement or anything like that. And these are children, and sometimes children will tell adults what they think the adults want them to hear, especially if those adults seem to be in a position of authority. And sometimes the child doesn't know what it's saying. And that's why, and then they might put a token child psychologist, which is also employed by them, in the discussion. So there's going to be maybe 2 or 3 adults in the room. Okay? And then there's the child. And then, the child protection workers, when we were dealing with them before, they were not always known to accurately record what was spoken in conversations. Okay? They stuffed up. They perjured themselves in a court of law. And, then what they do is they use that so-called information, which is often downright patently false, as grounds for removing the children. This is what was going on just before the Christmas holidays. And they tried to contact me on the 23rd, I think, 22nd or 23rd of December last year, right before Christmas. And, that just about ruined our Christmas. But I went straight on Facebook and I blasted them and I said, listen, you guys are going to be sued. You are going to be sued if you continue on this Bravo Sierra. I am aware of your tricks. I am well aware of your tricks, And they are a child kidnapping ring. The outcomes for foster children, for wards of the state, are very, very rarely positive. A state ward with a positive outcome is almost like a unicorn. And that's not just me saying that. That's various heads of child protection that have recently come out all over the world, including the head of child protection in Tasmania, who said that it was the same in Victoria and New South Wales and South Australia as what it is in Tasmania.
Guineith, we're going into a break.
Good outcome.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us, and if you'd like to contact her, you can go to usaprepares.com, click on the instructors tab. You'll see her there, and you can click the link, and it'll take you right to her Facebook page. That's an easy way to do it. Gwyneth, we're talking about homeschooling, and we're talking about the public training camp where most children attend. And when our son decided that he wanted to go, for the very first time he wanted to go to the public training camp, we said, okay, that's what you want to do? Sure. You're old enough to make that decision. So he went as a freshman to the local high school in the state of Missouri. And yes, the teachers did the same kind of thing you're talking about, asked him leading questions. And he had been homeschooled long enough that, he could handle himself. And in terms of being bullied by the others, he was a farm boy and he didn't have a girlfriend. And so they teased him and called him a pansy and all kinds of things and shoved him around. And that was okay because that was his rite of passage, I guess. And we had sent him to karate classes, Okinawa and Shoin-ryu, for 5 years. And he competed in the state tournaments, and he took first place. He competed in the regionals of 6 states, and he took first place. And then he went to the national competition where he took third place. So we weren't concerned about him being roughed up. And he literally had to use those skills that he learned when he went to public school.
I was going to say, how many noses did he have to break before they realized that, maybe picking on him was not a good idea?
Well, he didn't break any noses. Now our other son, I can't say the same thing for. Our other son went to karate classes along, all 3 of our children went to karate classes. And so one of our sons has broken 2 noses. So
okay.
But literally, I'm not exaggerating. He's done that. People picked on him, and he'll say, "You've got 2 seconds to take that back. 1, 2, bang!" And it was as simple as that. It counts quickly, but. Our son was in the public training camp, and the teachers are trying to figure out who these newcomers are to the village. Who are they? They're from Virginia. We're in Missouri, and just who are they? They have no visible means of support. What does that guy do? So they would ask our son. They would say, "So what does your dad do?" And he would say, "We don't talk about it."
I think something for the average import from Virginia, and it was kind of somewhere near around Langley, wasn't it? In that general neighbourhood. Yeah,
interesting.
That would normally be enough. I think in the United States for the kids to say, "Oh, I don't talk about what my dad does." Right. But, we've just moved from Virginia. What part of Virginia? Langley? I think that would make enough. I think that would be enough to make most school teachers say, "Oh, I'm going to drop this line of questioning right now." Any teacher with half a brain, any human being with half a brain, that would be a totally reasonable response. But I'll bet they didn't do that, did they?
No, they would have different. They would have different
these are not
teachers.
Normal human beings. School teachers are not normal humans.
Different teachers. Yeah, I guess they would meet in the teacher's room or the teacher's lounge, and they'd say, "I didn't get anywhere with that, with that Finelli kid. Maybe you can try." And the principal, the superintendent, they all were interested in what we did. They really were, and they were never able to determine what we do. But they were afraid of us. They were afraid of us.
That's right.
So it came to the drug testing situation. So our son said, they're going to have drug testing. And I was very concerned about that. They call your child out by some random system, they say. It's absolutely nonsense. They pick the children who will test
of course they do.
Negatively for drug testing, because they don't want the school to have a bad reputation for, of all the people that have been tested for drugs, a third of them test positively. So they don't want that. So they choose the ones who they are sure will test negatively, meaning no drugs in their system. So our child thought that this is going to be a problem, and I thought it was too. So I met with the superintendent of the school system, and I said very simply, you will not test our son for drugs without me or my wife or both of us being present. You will not do it, because he's a minor. He's a minor, and you will not do it. And they respected that. Well, I don't know if they respected it, but they honored that demand.
He's a minor, and they're subjecting him to a medical procedure without your knowledge or consent. And not only that, it's a violation of his rights of habeas corpus. You've got the right to refuse to incriminate yourself. And you say, oh, well, I don't use drugs. But you don't understand, they can spike the test. If they really want to get you, they can spike the test. They can disrupt the chain of evidence, and oops, there's somebody, they can contaminate the evidence. And, that's the hardest thing in the world to prove.
Yeah, but the sad thing...
It really is.
The sad thing about this...
It's tragic, it's terrible, but these people are so underhanded and so evil that they actually would do that. They really, truly are. And I do not trust them 1 ounce.
My contention was, what about that? What about false positives? So let's say a child is having a medical procedure or under the care of a medical professional and is on some kind of a prescription medicine, okay? And all of a sudden a child is called in for urinating in a cup, okay? And then what happens? They do a quick test there, and if it tests positive, they just want to make sure, so they send off that sample to the lab. And where's the lab? I don't know. Why don't I know? Because the school couldn't tell me. Why? Because the school didn't know where the lab was and who was in charge of it. Or
what's happened to the chain of evidence there? That's the disruption of the chain of evidence right there.
Well, so we went to a meeting and about this. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Finelli and I were on the drug testing committee. They thought, before they figured out what our position was, they put us on the committee. Then what they did was they changed our address. And they invited us to, the subsequent meetings. Except they mailed it to a different address in a different town.
Oh,
yes, and of course, we never got the invitations. So when I figured out what they were doing, we just showed up at the meetings. But what I'm saying is these kinds of things are pushed on the public. The public is, we'll call it lied to. The system misrepresents what's actually happening. Who's paying for all this drug testing? Or is it a grant? Or is the school system saying, instead of buying books, we'll pay for drug testing? So
it's a grant.
There are a lot. That's exactly right. And where does that come from? Washington, D.C. That's where that comes from. So we decided that we were going to fight it, but we couldn't, because we were the only ones of all the families that showed up to these meetings. We stood out like a sore thumb because we were the only ones who did not want drug testing. I said, okay, first of all, before there's any drug testing, how about, is there really a problem? Is there a problem that you're trying to solve? And if so, what is it? And they couldn't answer that. And then I said, okay, so before you do this drug testing, and before children are labeled as drug users by false positives, okay, so a child urinates in a cup, it comes back positive, teacher goes, oh my. Susie tested positively for drugs. And of course, that goes into the teacher's lounge, and did you know that Susie tested positively? Oh, my. And that gets spread around the teachers, so they all know that Susie tested positively. Now Susie is labeled as a drug user, and it may be a false positive reading. So I was adamant about this, and I tried to explain this to those ignorant teachers and ignorant parents who could not understand this. Yeah. So we were going to deploy drug testing for a problem they couldn't even say actually exists. And I looked like a fool to many of these people. Like, who is this guy from Virginia who's going against all of those teachers and the superintendent and the principals, who obviously are so learned that they know the answers. They know what's right for and best for our children. And besides, now school policy says if you want to be on the baseball team, the football team, the tennis team, if you want to park in the school parking lot, if you want to be in Future Farmers of America, which is a club, you can only do that if you submit to drug testing.
It's like this, okay? There's a... I was mentioning earlier, by the way, I'd like to sort of state here, in case the Victorian Child Protection Department and the Victorian Department of Education get too smug in thinking, well, the Victorian justice system is, or even the Australian justice system is so rigged they're going to decide in our favour. These court cases are not necessarily going to be brought in the Australian courts. Okay.
Yeah, I think they heard you loud and clear.
There are other courts on this earth that will hear such cases and whose laws they have breached and who are perfectly entitled to hear international cases.
Hold that thought. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and Guineith, if we had a little more support when we go against the big bad system, it would be helpful. But when we're all alone and people laugh at you, it's a lot tougher. And people literally said that we were not being fair to our children when we homeschooled them, that they wouldn't be able to socialize properly, as we discussed during hour number 1. And, my response to that was very simple. Why? Meaning, if you don't send your children to the public training camp, how are they going to learn how to get along with rough children? How are they going to get along in society?
Well, I think we already out that one.
Yeah. And my response was, why would I want my children to associate with thugs? Why?
Yeah.
Why? So they can learn how to be thugs? Is that what I want to do? Absolutely not. So my response was exactly that. Why would I want them to associate with thugs? And they said, well, how are they going to defend themselves in society? And I said, well,
they learn martial arts.
That's right.
And that's exactly what my children have done. Because we live pretty well in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't a martial arts dojo for them to learn from. But what my sons went and did was they felt that there was a need for them to learn hand-to-hand combat. So they went onto YouTube and they watched YouTube videos about mixed martial arts and hand-to-hand combat and how to fight using various weapons, And something? They would then go out and they would, go in some area where there was soft sand on the farm and they would practice. And do you know something? My son got so good at this, and he taught his brother as well of how to do this, of how to use mixed martial arts. But, I think that anybody who wanted to lure him into a fight would be extremely foolish to do so, because he would win. So in other words, not only does he have an IQ of about 145, he also is a pretty good mixed martial arts fighter, and he's a chess player who thinks 5, 6, and 7 moves ahead in a chess game. I think he's going to be all right. And he's starting, in America they would call it freshman high school year. Here they call it year 11, which is the second to last year of high school. He wants to graduate high school, but he's not going to do so at the high school down the road. He has chosen to go to another high school. But my younger son is not being enrolled at the high school down the road this year for the above, mentioned reasons, because they're endangering my children. And incidentally, what you were saying about drug use, okay? I mentioned that my oldest son was medically diagnosed with particular medical conditions which could be directly traced through hundreds of scientific studies back to the fact that I was traumatized during the final 2 trimesters of my pregnancy with him. There's a McGill University study out there. It's called Project Ice Storm. If you go on to your favorite search engine and just type in McGill Project Ice Storm, you will get some idea of what I'm talking about, and will be able to verify that there are, in fact, hundreds of research studies about the effects of into adolescence of children whose mothers were traumatized during pregnancy. And
I just looked it up. There it is.
There it is, right? And you'll see some of the pathologies that emerge in adolescence, and they're all there, aren't they, Vincent? Hundreds of them.
Class, just type in
hundreds
McGill.
Of studies.
MC. Here's what
Project
I did. MC.
Ice Storm McGill.
Yeah, MCGILL, Project Ice Storm. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and Guineith, almost anybody can homeschool his or her children. It takes dedication, it takes effort. It's a lot more difficult than watching a movie. It's a lot more difficult than watching a situation comedy on television. However, it's infinitely more rewarding. And I'll just give you an example. So our son, the one I described as going to preschool, and the one that decided that he wanted to, after being homeschooled from kindergarten through grade 9 by his mom and me, I decided he wanted to go to high school. And he ultimately went to college right after high school and decided he wanted to be a farmer. Well, it takes discipline to be a farmer. So here he is. He's got a 4-year degree in agriculture. He studied hard and, did all the things he was supposed to. Worked 15 hours a week minimum while he was at the university. And I'm talking about outside of his classwork. And he literally raises cattle on our farm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that means he has to get up early in the morning. He gets out when it's freezing cold. He feeds the cows. He gives them shots. He pulls calves when, the mama cows are having trouble delivering. He does things that a veterinarian might do, some of the things. And he is responsible for his own actions. If he doesn't do it, it doesn't get done. There's nobody to blame except himself. There's no one pushing him. He drives himself to the things that he needs to do, meaning he sets his schedule, he takes notes, he uses a computer for charts and graphs and statistics and, weights, and he looks on the internet for when the best time to sell calves and cows is, what are the best grasses. He decides what additional education he wants. He uses the internet for additional training. He goes to seminars. That's what he does, and he is a self-starter. Now, that is one of the traits that I believe is an outcome of homeschooling, becoming a self-starter. What do you think?
I would absolutely agree. You know, my children were actually homeschooled for many years when they were younger. And when we first arrived here, it was around about, about 18 months or 2 years after we arrived here on this farm, until we put them into the public training camp, because I didn't want to do that at that time, because I was totally traumatized myself, and my children had been traumatized by being basically harassed by a pedophile cartel, okay? And we had to get ourselves together. We had to have a degree of recovery. And then it got to a stage where my children, once again, like your children, said, Mum, we want to go to school. We want to meet other children in the district. We need to do so, and so
right.
Can you enroll us in the school? And initially I was reluctant, and then I thought, well, I think that the time has come to do that. So I enrolled them in the I actually took a look at the school that they now attend, and I said, no, I don't want them to ever go to that school. And so I sent them to a primary school in the other town, okay, which is 40 kilometres away instead of the one that's 20 kilometres away. But, you know, something, they had a really good time in the primary school there for their last couple of years of primary education, because it was a small country primary school, and the teacher and the headmaster weren't psychopaths, okay? But this one down the road, 20 k's in the other direction, most of the teachers are absolutely fine, except for about 4 or 5 teachers at the top who happen to run the show, who are, I would say, pretty well social justice warrior, communistic psychopaths, is the only way I could possibly describe them, okay? And that's why I don't want to send my children to that school. And because they have the, child protection workers attend the school 2 and 3 days a week, every week of the year, okay? Now, why is there a need for that? When you were a computer consultant going in and helping out the local high school, you were attending there 2 and 3 days a week, right? Because you needed to.
More. Yeah.
That means when you do that, you practically have an office there. Well, the child protection workers practically have an office in the same way that you practically had an office in that school.
Yeah.
You know, except there's a big difference between a tech worker and a child protection worker.
Yeah, well, you know, you're absolutely right. When I was consulting, everybody knew who I was. The students knew who I was. The teachers knew who I was. The principals knew. The school board, they all knew. They all knew because I spent, so much time there. You're absolutely right. And I didn't have an office per se, but yeah, I really did, because I was, I just picked where I wanted to be, and I made that my office. And, I had computers in it. Yeah, I had lots of servers and computers in it, but that's where I got a desk, and that's where when people wanted to see me.
They don't actually have an office, but they might as well. And it's like this. If you give somebody who attends a school regularly and they have a particular task, so it's like like the school saying, well, okay, we're going to employ a carpenter and we're going to supply him with wooden nails. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to find a way to use the wood and use the nails. They're going to make work for themselves, which in this particular school is going to involve somehow them busting up families. And that's a bad result.
Let me share with you a statistic that is absolutely unbelievable, and I just verified it. Now, I knew this when I lived in Virginia. Now, so this is absolutely shocking. You know, we have, let's say, a county school system, and in that county there may be an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. And there will be a principal of each one of those schools, elementary, mid, and high school. And there may actually be several elementary schools in the county, depending on the number of the geographical area of the county. So you could have multiple elementary schools, multiple middle schools, and multiple high schools in the same county. And they all report, those principals report up the chain to a county superintendent of schools, of public training. And the number I'm going to tell you is shocking. So what is the average term length of employment of a superintendent of schools in the United States? Well, I learned that back in the 1990s, the early 1990s, that school superintendents only survive about 3 years. 3 years.
Wow.
Let me say that a different way. They only survive 3 years. And each superintendent wants the same thing. He or she wants to build a school. They want to be known as the guy or gal that built that school. Well, those building of schools nearly bankrupts the county, because now we're talking about, we built a school, it was $6 million, which was the lowest cost that any school around had ever built one for.
That's like $2 million a year in school construction.
Right. For while that person was there. And right after we built that school, the superintendent was gone. Now, I know this guy. He's a friend of mine. And he became state superintendent in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But he told me that the average tenure was 3 years. During this broadcast, I looked it up. I went to the internet and I typed in average term of a school superintendent. And here's what it says.
3 years.
School district superintendent is largely a short-term job. The typical superintendent has been on the job 3 to 4 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
So,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that's because there are so many mistakes that are made, I believe, that they get out of Dodge. They do their damage, and they get out of Dodge, and they switch. And the school board say, wow, that guy we got now, we got to get rid of him. He's done so much damage. Yeah. So they get a new guy to do new damage. So they figure the devil they don't know is better than their devil. Now, I'm not saying that my friend did a bad job. He was absolutely phenomenal. He was really, really good. He literally allowed me to teach computer science without reporting to a principal in a high school. He literally gave me the largest room in the school district to teach my class. It was huge. It was the size of a gymnasium. He allowed me the freedom to teach my way. I wrote the curriculum. I taught my way. I even had my students wear uniforms in public school to my class. Mm-hmm. I said, if you want to be in my class, you have to wear a uniform. You can't come look into my class sloppy, because it distracts me. And if I'm distracted, I won't be able to teach. And I told the parents that. I told the parents that if their child is disruptive, I'll throw them out. If their child is late for class, I will lock them out of class.
Yeah.
If their child steals something, they will be prosecuted. And their child must behave properly in school and out of school at all times, or they're out of my class. And I had the parents sign a contract to that effect. And it worked. Yeah. It absolutely worked.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
Are we heading
in the
into the last segment?
We are. We'll be right back. Class, quick announcement. There's a conference March 8th and 9th in West Plains, Missouri. It's a 2-day regional conference. It's bringing back the American small farm. Bringing back the American small farm. March 8th and 9th. I plan to be there. And you can go to usapreparedness.com and you'll see a post that talks more about it. Joel Salatin will be there. Joel Salatin, brilliant farmer from Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. I plan on being there, and you may want to attend as well. So the website, AmericanSmallFarm.com. AmericanSmallFarm.com. Guineith, did you have some comments that you wanted to make in the final segment?
Okay. I would just like to say that, we have to really, really take this issue seriously, because this is the future of our whole country, okay? And what we're seeing here is a microcosm, a little universe of a problem that is much, much, much bigger. And I believe that the primary thing at this time, through secondary colleges or high schools, such as my children have been attending, is to teach people how to live in a communist regime. And that's not a good thing to be teaching, okay? And it's teaching the parents that we are going to dominate you, and you have to toe our line. And when that involves things like, the school chaplain being a pagan, and, for instance, having the students at the high school make voodoo drums as a recreational activity. I kid you not, this goes on at the high school down the road, the same high school. Can you believe that? That's just one example. And to have them learning about the religion of peace, and being told that it's a good thing, and that if you buck that particular system, that that it's not acceptable because it's not politically correct. This is their words, which is actually a communist term. Okay, it's a long string of behaviors and things. I'm astounded. Have they looked at what Haiti looks like, which is, the home in the west of the Djembe, which is the home of voodoo? Have they looked what it looks like? And they're having the high school students making voodoo djembe drums. The college chaplain, he never mentions God. He never mentions Jesus. He goes on in the school newsletter about how wonderful the college vegetable garden is. And I asked my children one day, do you ever get to see any of the produce from the vegetable garden? And they said, nah. And I said, you're kidding. Really? What's even the point of having it? What do they do with the produce? Oh, I don't know. It's just, these are small things. But they're not small things. They're important. It's offensive to me.
You would think that the school. You would think that the school that can't get enough backpatting. They're looking for ways of having parents say, "Wow, what a great school we have." You would think that they would have like a luncheon with the produce from the garden. Say, "Look what we've did."
No.
Nope.
No.
Guineith, it's always delightful broadcasting with you. I can't wait till we do it again. And boy, it'd be great to have you as a neighbor. No kidding. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you. Thank you, Guineith.